Let's move on over to Ole Miss, the last team we're going to be talking about today in part one of SEC conference preview. Ole Miss. Hmm. So they did pretty good in the transfer portal this offseason. Look, and here's the thing. I'll preview this for you right here, right now. Okay, you're going to listen to another two individuals that cover football at a national level. You're going to hear another two people be high on Ole Miss. I mean, that's just what it is. All right. That's just what it is. Um, Jackson Dart returns at quarterback, right? Obviously, you lose Quinshon Judkins to the portal, some NIL deal, whatever. I don't know how that happened, or I don't want to speculate, but he's gone. But they still have a pretty dang good running back room, if you ask me. I mean, it's pretty loaded. It's pretty dang loaded in that room. You like the receivers, you like what you have at tight end. Defensively, it feels like they plugged some holes there. So I'm very high on this team. Let's start about talking about Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart has very, very nice odds to win the Heisman Trophy this year. In fact, I'll tell you what those odds are. I mean, if you look at his stats from last year, like he had a New York type season, kind of. 3,300 yards, 23 touchdowns, five interceptions, right? To go along with some rushing yards as well. Very, very solid season from Jackson Dart. You're adding even more talent on this team and another year of chemistry with wide receivers, with a wide receiver like Trey Harris, a tight end with Caden Prieskorn. And what's crazy is that this offense is just built through the transfer portal. And now I've talked about, how to value recruiting more. I literally just got done talking about that, but it seems like they've had these transfers. When you get transfers and you hit and they do stay for multiple years, seems like you are in a pretty good spot sometimes. And it feels like Ole Miss has put themselves in a spot offensively where they got all their chips in, man. This offense can be really good. I think Lane Kiffin, he's got to be excited about this.
I'm 100% with you here. I'll talk on Jackson Art just a little bit here. Uh,
Fourth in odds, by the way,
play,
plus 1,400 to win the Heisman.
yeah, and listen, I don't think that's a crazy hit at all. I do think if Ole Miss has success, it's going to be on the back of Jackson Dart. He's going to put up numbers if he's healthy, regardless. So he's going to be in that conversation statistically, anyways. Storyline will be there if they're winning games, like I think you and I both think they can. But one thing about Jackson Dart, a lot has been made of his play action pass versus his not play action pass, right? Just regular drop back passes. And last year, he graded significantly higher off of play action, right? And that's to be expected, right? That is play action pass works, right? If you're running the ball as well as Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin like to, I mean, he completed almost 69% completions, 11 touchdowns, two interceptions. Off of not play action, his completion percentage went down. You're looking at 61% completion percentage. His yards per attempt dropped significantly from 11 to 7. And I don't think he can't improve that. I think he will at least a little bit. I think it helps bringing in a guy like Antoine Beanie Wells, who we'll talk about later.
Juice Wells.
But yeah, Anton, who the hell is Beanie Wells?
Beanie
Antoine
Wells was
Juice
a
Wells.
running back for the Arizona Cardinals way back.
Jeez, man. It is, yeah, we're closing on hour 4 right now. I've had to change. If you've been watching this whole time, credit to you, by the way, but I've had to change my AirPods because they keep dying because that's how long we've been going. That's how old they are. Regardless, though, Dart is a stud. You got good depth in that quarterback room. Walker Howard is a guy I know a lot of people in the industry are high about. He's nice depth to have. Austin Simmons is a young cat. He's actually 2 years younger than his age might there's grade might suggest. Remember, he was the guy that reclassified 2 years to enroll with Ole Miss. AJ Max, you bring those are all very talented players in that room. Something happens to Dart, though, I think you're going to see a significant drop out. That's just because of how good he is and how experienced he is in that offense. But regardless, though, I like Walker Howard and the future of this room.
Yeah, the running back room, it goes four deep. And three of them are transfers, right? You got Bentley, who was there last year. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry. Honestly, he was more efficient than Quinshon Judkins, if you can believe it or not. I know Judkins was banged up some of the time, but Then they bring in Rashad Amos from Miami, Ohio, who was really effective for them last year, running for over 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns, was a big reason why they were so good last year and winning the MAC, especially when uh, Brett Gabbert went down, their quarterback there. Henry Parrish of Miami, he was going to get beat out probably in that running back spot, but he still had 600 yards last year. Just another ad. And then Logan Diggs, I don't know if he'll be back in time for that fall camp. We'll see. But he's a guy that's coming up from LSU. He was really, really effective for them late down the stretch. Kind of a bigger guy. I think they got a lot of different bodies, a lot of different ways that they can utilize this running back room. But I think it starts with Ulysses Bentley, um, and how good he's going to be. I think it's going to determine the effectiveness of this run game as well as the offensive line.
I'm with you too. And I mean, to me, I love the different body types with Bentley, Amos, Parrish. They like the versatility in this room. Lane Kiffin loves to run the football, and they're bringing in offensive linemen that also like to run the football too. I think you see that when we talk about them later. Yeah, I mean, you lose Judkins, right? But the aggregate of this room, not a ton of drop off. I don't think so, right? I mean, Bentley was really, really good back in that shortened COVID season. He had 11 touchdowns. The last time he was really like one of those lead running backs in a room. Amos is a nice get, like you said. Yeah, I'm with you. I like this room.
Let's move over to the wide receivers then. I mean, you got a big three. You got Trey Harris, who was phenomenal last year. I know he didn't eclipse 1,000 yards, but he was phenomenal last year. All right. He is a really good receiver. He is their alpha. Then Juice Wells or Antoine Wells comes over from South Carolina. He was hurt pretty much all of last year. Okay. Um, he's really good. All right. He was supposed to be their dude. It actually allowed for the rise of Xavier Legette, which was really nice for him. He ended up being a first round draft pick, which is pretty crazy. Then Jordan Watkins over there was 700 yards from last year, and he played in all 13 games. He came over a few years ago from Louisville. I mean, it's crazy. All three of those guys were transfers. And Jackson Dart was a transfer. Three of those running backs were transfers.
Great
Then you look
scorer.
at Prescorn was a transfer. Jordan Smart was a transfer. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, these are all these guys' like last years of eligibility. So we'll see what that looks like next year, that offense. But yeah, I mean, you gotta like the first three names there, even four names. I like I like Jordan Watkins. I like Jordan Smart. I think they're pretty solid.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm with you. Trey
sorry, not
Harris.
not Jordan Watkins, Jordan Smart, and
Yeah. Yeah,
I
Jordan
guess
Watkins. Yeah,
well, Jordan Watkins is
both
number three, but
Jordan.
I'm talking about like four and five. I
Oh,
don't know. I
Aiden
guess
Williams.
is he gonna be that number five guy? I don't know.
Him and
I don't know.
Caden Lee. I mean, they had what 100 plus snaps last year.
So,
We'll see.
but either way, it doesn't matter as long as those big three stay healthy, right?
It would have been nice to be honest. I mean, if you want to dream, right? If Zachary Franklin was healthy and playing for you this year and back to his UTSA form, regardless, though, you got Trey
That's
Harris.
so
You
true. I
mentioned
forgot that he
him.
was transferring there.
Yeah, he's at Illinois now. You mentioned Trey Harris.
Got out of
I
there.
want to talk a little bit about him. He is a stud. And I want to give a comp here. I don't know if it's crazy or not, but he reminds me of like 90%, maybe 85%, just because of how good this guy was. 85% of Roma Dunze, right? Roma Dunze was a guy, the route running, with the catch radius, contested catch rate down the field, and of course the production was there as well. Now is Harris going to go top 10 in the draft? He's probably not the athlete that Dunze is, which is fair, but he's probably the second best wide receiver in the SEC behind Burden, right? I don't think that's crazy to say. You could
No, not
argue
at all.
Isaiah Bond, whatever.
I don't
To
think
me,
you
I
can.
think in terms of just legit wide receivers, like Trey Harris, he is so good. So I'm all in on him. And then even Wells too, man. He was a monster in 22. He pairs so well with Harris and this offense in general. They've kind of been missing, a short to intermediate yards after catch guy. Um, this portal get flew absolutely under the radar because of he was hurt last year and so much happened. And all of a sudden you're in the SEC, you're gonna wake up and see, oh, Anton Wells he's in Ole Miss now. I remember him a couple years ago and oh, there he goes, 120 yards on the day and whatnot. And yeah, I love this group.
Caden
The top
Prieskorn.
end.
is
Yeah.
a stud as well at tight end. I mean, he was uber productive. Uber. I mean, we talked about Mason Taylor being I guess overrated in EA College Football 25. Caden Prescourt, I don't think is a guy that can get bumped up enough. That dude is a stud, especially in that receiving game. 30 catches for 449 yards, 4 touchdowns. Transferred in last year from Memphis. And we were higher than him last year. I didn't think he was going to be that good, right? Caden Prescourt was fantastic, causing Michael Trigg, among other things, right? um, to transfer out of there over to Baylor. So yeah, he's fantastic. And then the offensive line. I mean, how are we feeling about the offensive line?
Listen, I like it. I mean, I think Diego Pounds was again another very, very solid, experienced get in the portal. He is a big dude, right? He's really, really good in pass pro as well. And I think he gives you a little bit of leverage trying to move some big dudes on your schedule in the SEC. I mean, you got to play Kentucky, right? You're gonna have to move those guys. And Kentucky's game, you're gonna want to try, you're gonna have to win, right? You're gonna have to move those guys up front, Deion Walker and all those other guys there, Keyshawn Silver. So you're gonna need big linemen or at least use leverage well. So yeah, I like Pounds. You're bringing in two guards from Washington, who again I talked about earlier. They're Joe Moore, a winning ward. Joe Moore, a winning offensive line, and that wasn't the best offensive line in the country, probably not, but it was still really darn good. Kleppo and Julius Buello, those guys were really, really solid for Washington. Both big humans as well. Can play guard, can give you depth, can give you flexibility. I love it too. And then also Caleb Warren is coming back. Now, is he the best center in the SEC? No.
No.
Is he an experienced center in the SEC? Yes. And I know we've talked about that a lot this year, or this, I'm sorry, this episode here. And back when we talked about Kentucky and even Florida. But to me, experience matters, man. And I know I feel like he's gonna get better. And I think you have at least a floor of what this offensive line can be. And the upside, I think, with those transfers is pretty good.
Yeah, I thought of the guys returning, I thought Jeremy James was probably the best one of those guys, in my opinion. And he's there back at, I'm assuming right guard, but I mean, who knows? Does Buelo or Kalepo, do they all fight for that spot? Can one of those guys play center, kick Caleb Warren out of there? I don't know. Micah Pettis, I'm hoping improves. We'll see. But again, coming back after playing a ton of snaps last year. What's nice is that you're still keeping a core nucleus of guys here, but you're
Yeah.
also adding some guys that can have an impact. And we talk about, fixing your offensive line versus making your offensive line in the transfer portal. This is an instance where I think Ole Miss, more so fixed it. And I think this offensive line can improve. Not that it was like terrible last year. It really wasn't that bad last year. But I mean, Ole Miss fans would tell you differently. Oh, what? I feel like everyone thinks that they have a bad offensive line. In college football, it's
Until
kind of
you
like a
do, until you
yeah, and
really
then
do.
all of a sudden you do have a bad offensive line. You're like, wait, I actually maybe we didn't have such a terrible offensive line. So that's a really good point. But yeah, so this offensive line, like you said, I think it could be pretty good. The point is, this offense is good. That's the point. That's the point we're trying to make here. Now let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, where you're looking at some dudes that you got in the transport on the defensive side of the ball. You got some absolute dudes at the
This
top of the
this is
line.
yep. I'm sorry, real quick. This defense, we talked about the offense being good. This defense, this is the money maker. This is where Pete Golding is getting paid. This is where the investment went in. This is what you plan to fix this offseason. And this is where your eggs are in the basket of how well this defense plays this year.
Yeah, and let me tell you, it should play well. You never know with some of these transfers, but Princely Umanmielen is a unbelievable pass rusher. Walter Noel is an impact player, an impact force on the interior. Okay. Do those guys, you hear all that locker room stuff about both of those guys? I don't think either of those guys care. I think they went to Ole Miss because they wanted to win. I think there was money. I mean, whatever it was, okay. They're both there now on that defensive line, and they make it significantly better. Not to mention Jared Ivey's back. Okay. Uh, You bring in a transfer from Jacksonville State who had 8 sacks over there, Chris
Yeah.
Hardy. I mean, yeah, you don't love to be like, oh, this line was fixed by the transport. Like that doesn't happen a lot, right? However, Prince Yellen and Walter Nolan are two different levels of athlete that you don't see on the defensive line hit the portal very often. Or if you do, they're in very limited numbers. And Ole Miss happened to snag two of them. And I do think Chris Hardy over there, I don't know, would probably play like a jack linebacker, I guess, or just kind of an edge rusher, smaller edge rusher coming off. We'll see, man. And again, that entire defensive line was built on transfer. I mean, it's crazy. This entire team was built on transfers, whether they're coming in from this year or the year before, which is wild. You
You
do
got to
not
look
see
over to
that.
Florida State like a year ago, right? And there are a lot of transfers on that team that hit and stayed for multiple years and they grew together. Similar here, where you're sprinkling in some really, really talented players. You mentioned Prince Liu, Walter Nolan, Jared Ivey was a guy coming over, I think, from Georgia Tech a year ago. Um, so he's been there's the second year. You got to replace Cedric Johnson and Isaac Ukwo, right? Those guys are pretty good for you, but they're also like replacement level players, right? I think Jared Ivey can kind of kick back out the edge, replace a guy like Cedric Johnson. You said Princely you can be your force, your true alpha pass rusher. Walter Nolan, when he puts it together, and I don't want to sound like hyperbole here, but when I watch him play, I genuinely think when he puts it together on a play, he does things that just about nobody else in college football can do. Maybe the Michigan defensive tackles. That's it. When he is on, I'm thinking Jalen Carter type impact, right?
Well, in the pass game, I
Question.
think. I mean, running game, some, yeah. I think
Yeah.
as a pass rusher interior in that three tech, he is nuts.
Yes. But the question is consistency, it's injury, it's whatever it may be. But I also like that he is surrounded by other good pieces. It's not just him. He's a great fit next to JJ Pegues, right? Perfect complement to a guy like Walt, who's JJ's very good against run, big dude. He's low key athletic. Like to use him on offense, right? And I think he started as a tight end, if I'm not mistaken, at Auburn. He kind of played both ways, whatever it may be. Akilo Stone, he graded out well in a more limited role. So we'll see there, but I don't know, man. To me, this is about as excited as you can be for an Ole Miss defense, especially defensive front, in a long time. And even the depth wise, Cam Franklin coming in with a ready-made body for the SEC. How much can he contribute for you, four-star guy? But he's also like your fourth or fifth piece on that edge group, which is awesome. And so it should
In
be. Well done, Lane Kiffin.
in the transfer portal alone, you're adding 22 sacks to this defense in the transfer portal alone. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So
And
we'll,
that's not to mention if you bump down a guy like Suntrain Perkins, you line him up at edge, whatever it may do, because he played a lot of edge last year ago, right? 300 some snaps at edge. So you not that you're going to replicate that necessarily, but I don't know. To me, the fits here are awesome. And it's up to Pete Golding. It's up to Pete Golding not to
yeah,
botch this.
well, we've seen him do that before. So um, don't believe what people tell you. All right, Pete Golding was a huge reason for Alabama not winning more national titles than they did. All right. Let's look at the linebacking core. You return Kari Coleman, who had 37 tackles, 3 sacks, yada yada yada. You add Chris Paul in the transfer portal from Arkansas. We mentioned him a little bit earlier. I don't know that he's the best linebacker. I mean, I think he was a little bit overrated in terms of the transfer portal ratings, but oh my gosh, I mean, in terms of like the linebackers that were available in the transfer portal, I mean, this is a great get. I mean, Chris Paul is going to, I think, add. I believe he will add to this defense at the linebacker position. It was certainly a position of need. He's going to play Mike for them, so Lord knows that they needed a Mike this offseason, and they got one.
Yeah, I kind of throw in linebacker and offensive line um in a similar grouping where it's like experience is nice, right? Experience is just nice. And it doesn't mean that they're good, right? But I do think it gives you some kind of floor, like I keep saying here. And Paul, again, is a nice guy to have next to the field of Perkins. I feel like the way that they've developed this team, the general manager of Ole Miss deserves a heck of a raise because you're pairing these guys, elite athlete, very, very stable, consistent player. Elite athlete, very, very stable. Like you are mixing and matching, and you can, make the best out of um all these guys and just really maximize potential.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. So that linebacking core looks to be pretty decent, I think. Now, when I look at the secondary, that is the biggest question about this defense, right? I feel really good about the defense line. I know the defense line is relying on transfers, but like those guys are like proven guys, right? And I think secondary is interesting because sometimes it's more system dependent. I don't know. I believe that pass rush is a trait that carries over a lot easier than learning certain zone coverages, different defense. I think it's different in the secondary. You're bringing in what, five transfers in the secondary? I mean, you got some good ones though. Like Trey Amos is a good football player. Okay, coming over there from Alabama, he earned snaps there at Alabama. And is he going to play probably outside corner for them?
Yeah, he'll probably be like their top corner, I think, and believe it or not. But he was also going to be the top corner in Alabama last year. I thought he was really impressive the way he improved over the season, and he's just a really nice get for them in the portal.
Yeah, and then Isaiah Hamilton's coming over at safety spot. I'm assuming he starts alongside. Is Brandon Turnage? Is he going to start at nickel too, or is it Yam
You got
Banks going
Yam
to start
Banks
it?
as well. I
Is he
like
going to
his
start at
game.
nickel, or are they going to move Banks to safety? I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with some of these pieces. I think it's going to depend. But what's nice about having that many pieces, although LSU saw this last year and didn't really experience success, when you have a lot of pieces like this in your secondary, um, Yam Banks coming over from South Alabama, by the way, you have a chance to mix and match, and what's nice is, and we'll talk about their schedule in a second there, is you get 4 games to break in the secondary and figure out what pieces are working and what is not working, which is really nice. Really, really, really nice. In fact, I would say you even have maybe 6 weeks. Um, Kentucky could be a problem, I think, for Ole Miss with that defense there. But I do think you have some time to at least break that in. And I think the schedule dynamic of that helps big time when you're looking at the improvement and development of the secondary, given that it's like
Yeah,
mostly transfers.
I'm with you too. And what they do with their safeties is they kind of move them around. I mean, you saw Trey Washington and John Sanders line up a bunch in the box at free safety, in the slot, whatever it may have been. I think Pete Golding liked to kind of rotate those guys. And so you've got versatile players like Banks and Brandon Turnage that can do a lot of things for you, even Isaiah Hamilton as well. To be honest, though, what you could really, really use is a guy like Davidson Igbinosun, right? He was a guy that transferred a couple years ago to Ohio State. And he obviously struggled a bit, but also showed a lot of promise and talent there. And at Ole Miss, right, his freshman year, he would be just the icing on the top. If he was on this roster, I would feel so, so good about, picking Ole Miss to do some damage in the postseason. But yeah, so like you're replacing DeAndre Prince, Zamari Walton. Those were your best cornerbacks last year, along with Dejon Anthony, right? So you got a lot to replace on that secondary, like we've talked about. But the pieces are there. The coaching is a veteran coach, and I guess we'll see though. But the investments there, I do think there is more promise on this defense than there's ever been, and it could be really fun. I do think, assuming right, we're talking about on paper right now. Like on paper, Perkins off the edge is great, and Prince EU is diamond up tackles, and Walter Nolan's putting together consistent. And so like a lot, I think has to be happened, but I don't know, man. It just feels like it's going to.
Yeah. So let's look at the schedule then. They have a 9.5 win total, right? Furman they get at home, Middle Tennessee at home, at Wake Forest, Georgia Southern at home. Talk about a layup of a schedule to break your team in. Thank you to Ole Miss's AD for giving Lane Kiffin that. And then you get Kentucky at home and South Carolina on the road. before you get LSU in Death Valley. And you get a bye, then you get Oklahoma at home, at Arkansas, Georgia at home, bye at Florida, and then the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State. Um, when I look across the SEC in terms of manageable schedules, I put this on the list of manageable schedules and amongst SEC schedules. I'm all over this over. I mean, when we're you get Georgia at home, sure, mark that up as a loss. All right, then just win. Basically, you have to win 2 of 3 in terms of at Florida, at LSU, and Kentucky are kind of the ones that I'm worried about. South Carolina maybe, but at Florida could be interesting. But yeah, I have to go over 9.5 here.
I'm with you too. Even that Georgia game, I think this roster is built significantly better to compete with Georgia this year than it was last year. I think Jackson Dart's learned a lot. You said it though. This schedule, the dynamics, awesome. All in favor of Ole Miss. Part of the reason why they're putting a lot of investment into this senior-ridden team, which is another thing we absolutely love, right? Veterans in college football. We're still on the end of the COVID year, right? We saw Washington and Michigan really take advantage of that. Ole Miss is not correct. I mean, how many people were saying Washington's a bona fide, national championship team? And we were high on them, right? But we weren't, I wasn't surprised that they won the championship, but I was like impressed, right? And Ole Miss, not saying that they're going to, but the pieces are there. The precedent is there, right? With the year ago. I don't know, man. I feel really good. Them in Missouri, their schedule is really, really good. And I feel pretty good about taking over 9.5.
Yeah, I mean, right? I mean, I can understand like there's some games where you're like, okay, this could slip up, right? Like Ole Miss. I can understand the argument of like, oh, maybe they haven't been there. Like they're just like there's a lot of transfers. Are they gonna how's that gonna cohesively like work? I don't know. I don't know, man. Um, yeah, we you have to take over 9.5. You have to. Have to. Which is crazy because that means of the 8 teams that we talked about today, I think I took the over for 6 of them. The unders are coming though. The unders,
Yeah.
the unders are coming. All right. I promise you in the back half of this. Uh, yeah, I think I will have majority. I think I'll have more overs than unders in the SEC, which I feel like I do every year. And then I have to realize that everyone's expectations in the SEC are above are up. So then I end up getting screwed. But in terms of when we
Mhm.
do our betting show, all that matters is you pick the right ones. You know, it's all that matters. For this one, we're projecting. There's no harm. There's no harm in taking LSU under 9. There's no harm in taking Ole Miss over 9.5. But that's how we see it.